At 48, I never imagined I'd find myself questioning everything I thought I knew about my life. I always assumed that by now I would have settled into a predictable routine, mornings spent at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, afternoons teaching my art class, and evenings spent relaxing with my husband David in our cozy suburban home. Life had always felt steady, predictable, and safe. But one evening, everything changed. It all started when David suggested we attend a high society gala hosted by one of his business partners. David had worked as an architect for over 20 years, his career solid and his reputation impeccable. His boss, Jonathan Greenfield, was a man I had met only a handful of times at company events. Jonathan, at 52, was tall, charismatic, and often the center of attention at these gatherings. The gala took place at a grand hotel in downtown Manhattan, the chandeliers sparkling overhead as the room buzzed with conversation, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Normally, I'd avoid these kinds of events, preferring the comfort of my own home, but David insisted. I reluctantly put on an elegant black dress and joined him for the evening. At first, everything seemed ordinary enough. David was deep in conversation with his colleagues, and I mingled with other spouses. It wasn't until Jonathan approached me that everything took a turn. "Emily, may I steal you for a moment?" he asked, his deep voice cutting through the noise of the crowd. I froze for a second. Why? Would Jonathan want to speak with me? I gave him a polite smile and followed him through a side corridor away from the party. As we moved farther from the ballroom, the noise faded into a quiet hum, and my pulse quickened. Jonathan led me to a private lounge, a dimly lit room with a crackling fire and leather chairs. "I hope I'm not keeping you from anything important," he said, his expression unusually serious. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and a sense of unease washed over me. I nodded, though my curiosity was growing. What could he possibly want to discuss? Jonathan's eyes never left mine as he gestured to the armchair across from him. I hesitated for a moment, a strange tension building between us. The room was quieter now, the soft crackling of the fire filling the silence. I took a seat, my heart beating a little faster. What was happening? What did Jonathan want from me? He exhaled slowly, running his hands together as if gathering his thoughts. "I'm sorry to pull you away from the party, Emily, but there's something important I need to tell you about David," he said, his voice steady but with an edge I couldn't quite place. I straightened, my stomach tight with sudden worry. David? Was something wrong with his work? Had something happened that I didn't know about? "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jonathan paused for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his words were measured. "It's not easy for me to say this, but I've been meaning to talk to you for a while. David has been neglecting certain aspects of his life, his work, his responsibilities, and most importantly, you." I felt as though the ground had shifted beneath me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. My mind was racing. David was the most reliable man I knew, the one who always cared for our home, our life together. Could he really be neglecting me? Jonathan leaned forward, his eyes never leaving mine. "I've watched David for years. He's been so dedicated to his career, so focused on achieving more and more. But Emily, he's been missing something, or rather, someone. He's been missing you. Not just as his wife, but as the person who has stood by his side all these years, supporting him through everything." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. A cold wave of disbelief washed over me. I had always felt appreciated by David, or at least I thought I had. I had stood by him through everything, supporting his career, managing our home, keeping everything running smoothly. "David loves me," I said, my voice trembling as I tried to convince myself. "He's always been there for me." Jonathan shook his head slowly, almost sadly. "I know David loves you, Emily, but love isn't just about providing and being present when it's convenient. He doesn't see you the way he should. He's so consumed with his work, with his achievements, that he doesn't notice the little things, the way you care for him, the way you hold everything together. You deserve more than this." I wanted to speak, to deny what he was saying, but the words caught in my throat. His expression was so earnest, so filled with quiet conviction that I couldn't shake the feeling he might be right. Had I truly been invisible in David's life, simply a fixture in the background, unnoticed in the midst of his success? Emily, Jonathan said gently, his voice lowering, you're an extraordinary woman. You deserve to be seen. Not just by David, but by everyone around you. I just thought you should know that. The weight of his words settled on me like a heavy blanket that I couldn't push away. I was frozen, unable to fully comprehend what was happening, what Jonathan was suggesting. Could this really be true? Had I been so focused on supporting David, on creating a life for us, that I had neglected myself, my own needs, my own worth? Jonathan leaned back slightly, studying my face. I don't mean to overstep, Emily, but sometimes the people closest to us can't see what we need because they're too caught up in their own lives. I just wanted you to know, you matter. You deserve to be seen. The silence between us stretched long, thick with unspoken thoughts. For the first time, I felt truly seen not just by Jonathan, but by myself. I had spent so many years pouring everything I had into my marriage, into my family, but now I realized I had neglected the one person who deserved my attention the most, me. I don't know what to say, I whispered, the lump in my throat making it hard to breathe. I had come to this gala expecting a typical evening, but now I was facing a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. Jonathan's words had shaken me in a way I never anticipated. I don't want to make things uncomfortable, Jonathan said quietly, his gaze softening. But sometimes the truth is hard to hear. Just think about it, Emily. You deserve to be seen. The silence between Jonathan and me felt thick, like the heavy air before a storm. His words echoed in my mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. You deserve to be seen. How many times had I tried to be the woman David needed, the wife who stood by his side, taking care of everything, always behind the scenes, always supporting, never asking for more. And yet here was Jonathan, someone I barely knew, telling me what I had been too afraid to admit myself. Could it be true? Had I been invisible in my own marriage? I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. David loves me, I said, but the words felt hollow now. He's always been there for me. Jonathan's gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. Emily, I'm sure David loves you, but love isn't just about being there when it's convenient. Love is about truly seeing each other, truly being present. And I'm telling you, from what I've seen, David doesn't see you the way you deserve. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on me. The room felt smaller, the warmth of the fireplace suddenly stifling. Was I really willing to admit that after all these years, David had never truly seen Menet in the way I had always hoped, the way I needed? Jonathan leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering to a near whisper. You give so much, Emily. You've spent your life supporting him, managing everything, taking care of your family. But when was the last time someone truly noticed what you've given? When was the last time David truly appreciated the sacrifices you've made, the ways you've held everything together? I felt my chest tighten as I fought to hold back the tears that were threatening to rise. He was right. I had given everything to this marriage, to David, and in return, I had felt overlooked, like a ghost in my own home. I had told myself that was just the way it was, that love didn't always need grand gestures or constant attention. But deep down, I knew something was missing, something I had quietly longed for but had never voiced. Sometimes, Jonathan continued, his voice gentle but insistent, an outsider can see things that those within can't. And Emily, you deserve more. You deserve to be seen for who you are, not just as someone's wife, not just as the person who keeps everything running. You deserve to be seen as the remarkable woman you've always been. His words hit me like a cold wave, washing over me and making my heart race. It was as if he had peeled back a layer of myself I didn't even realize was there, exposing the raw truth I had buried for years. The truth that I had been living in the shadows of my own life, always giving, never asking for anything in return. Was it too much to ask to be seen, truly seen, by the man I had spent my life with? I shook my head, trying to push the thought away. I don't know what you mean, Jonathan. Mark and I've been through so much together. This is just this is just how marriage is, isn't it? Jonathan sighed, his gaze never leaving mine. I know, Emily. I respect that. But I couldn't sit back and watch you live like this, when I know you deserve so much more. I felt a wave of frustration building inside me, mixed with something else, something darker, more painful. I wanted to deny everything he was saying, to tell him he was wrong, that David loved me and appreciated me in his own way. But a part of me couldn't deny what he was saying. Could it be true that I had spent so many years of my life in a marriage where I had been seen as nothing more than a background character in David's story? The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I had spent my life being invisible, giving everything without ever asking for anything in return. Jonathan had opened my eyes to something I wasn't ready to face. And now, for the first time, I didn't know what to do with the truth. I sat there, Jonathan's words echoing in my mind, each one striking me like a sharp blow. You deserve to be seen. Those words repeated in my mind, like a storm forming, ready to tear everything apart. How had I not realized this sooner? I had spent my entire life sacrificing for David, for our family, for his career. But had I ever thought about myself? Had I ever stopped to ask what I wanted? Jonathan continued to look at me, his eyes full of sincerity, as if he wanted me to realize something important that I had ignored for so many years. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. The question in my mind was now, am I ready to face the truth? Maybe you're right, I whispered, as though answering a question I never wanted to confront. For the first time, I felt something shift inside me. The life I had lived, the sacrifices I had made for David, now seemed like I had forgotten myself in the process. I had lived for him, for our family, but I had forgotten about me. I had forgotten my own desires, my own needs. Jonathan leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle but firm. I just want you to think about this, Emily. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not just for what you do for everyone else. Those words hit me like a punch to the heart. I had neglected myself for so long, and now, for the first time, I felt like I was standing at a crossroads I had never thought about before. I needed to find myself again. What about David, though? Would he understand what I just said? And could I really change this life I had built? We drove home in silence. The car passed by empty streets, and I sat beside David, my hands tightly clasped in my lap, but my mind was miles away. You deserve to be seen. Jonathan's words still echoed in my head. When we finally pulled into the driveway, it felt like the world had shifted, though everything else around me seemed the same. David remained focused on the steering wheel, not noticing the tension in the air. He turned off the engine and got out of the car without saying a word. I followed him into the house, watching him take off his jacket and place it on the chair before retreating into his office, absorbed in his work. I had always thought this was the normal rhythm of family life. He was busy with his career, while I kept everything stable at home. But now, Jonathan's question echoed in my mind. When was the last time he truly saw me? When we entered the house, I paused, sensing the distance between us. David, we need to talk, I said, my voice soft but filled with resolve. He looked up, clearly startled. About what? I took a deep breath and met his gaze. About us. His brow furrowed slightly. What about us? I felt a lump form in my throat, but I couldn't pull back. I feel invisible, David. His eyes narrowed. What? I feel like I've spent years being the wife who supports you, who keeps everything running, who makes sure everything in our life stays steady. And I do love you, but somewhere along the way I stopped being seen. He paused, silent for a moment, as if processing my words. Emily, I didn't know you felt this way. I always thought you were happy with the life we built. I shook my head, feeling like a shadow standing behind him. How could you know if you never truly looked at me? How could you know if you've only been focused on work, on your career? and never really saw me for who I am. David was quiet, his eyes lost in thought. I didn't know. I really didn't. I looked at him, not finding comfort in his words anymore. Had I really been overlooked all this time just because I was so caught up in making sure he had everything he needed? Maybe I've been so focused on taking care of you that I've forgotten about myself, I said softly, almost to myself. David stayed silent for a long time, and I knew then that things had changed. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I had said what I needed to say. Now I had to figure out what I needed, and whether David could truly see me again. The silence between David and me was thick, like a storm was brewing in the air. I could feel the tension building inside me, a mixture of fear, frustration, and something I hadn't fully recognized until now, anticipation. Jonathan had made me see something I wasn't ready to face, and now I had said it out loud. I had told David how I felt, though I had been living in the background of my own life, always giving, always supporting, but never truly being seen. David stood across from me, still processing my words. His face had gone pale, his hands rubbing his temples as though he was trying to make sense of it all. Emily, he started, his voice strained. I didn't know. I didn't know you felt like this. I stood still, my heart racing in my chest, but a strange calmness settled over me. The storm I had feared was already here. What would happen now? Would David finally wake up? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I had built my life around, the one I had supported and loved unconditionally. And yet, I could feel something breaking inside me. A part of me that had been silent for so long was finally speaking out, and it terrified me. What if things couldn't be fixed? What if I had waited too long? Do you even realize, David, I said, my voice trembling, how long it's been since you actually saw me, since you noticed the little things I do for you, for us? My breath caught as the words poured out. The way I've been here, holding everything together while you've been consumed by your work, don't you see how much I've given up just to make sure we had a life? David looked away, his eyes downcast, and in that moment, I felt the weight of every year I had spent in his shadow. My chest tightened. I didn't mean to make you feel this way, he whispered, but his words seemed empty, hollow, as though he was only saying what he thought I wanted to hear. No, I said, shaking my head. You didn't mean to, but that's the problem, David. You've been so focused on everything else that you didn't even notice how much I've been sacrificing. I felt the sting of tears threatening to surface, but I held them back, refusing to let them fall. Not now. Not when I was finally speaking my truth. He took a step closer, his hand reaching out as if to touch me, but I stepped back, putting distance between us. Emily, he said, his voice softer now, I never meant to hurt you. I've always tried to provide for us, to make sure we were okay. I looked at him, my heart racing as the words I had been holding in for so long came rushing out. Providing isn't enough, David. It never was. I needed you to see me. To really see me. There it was, the truth. The weight of it was almost unbearable, but it felt like a weight I needed to carry now. No more pretending. No more waiting for him to change. This was it. This was the moment when everything would either break or shift. Please, Emily, he said, his voice cracking. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this. And for the first time in years, I didn't have the answer either. The story of Emily reflects a common issue in modern life: sacrificing oneself in a relationship without receiving proper recognition. It reminds us that in relationships, especially marriage, understanding and truly seeing each other is crucial. Like Emily, many people may feel like they are living in the shadows of their relationship, always giving their best, without receiving acknowledgement or appreciation from their partner. The advice from this story is to learn to share your feelings and personal needs with your partner, and not let silence or unspoken assumptions strain the relationship. Don't forget yourself in the process of caring for others. Take time to care for and love yourself, because when you feel seen and loved, you can offer that to others. Also, don't be afraid to confront the truth and ask for what you truly deserve in relationships.